Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Time, a Wave original. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Subscribe, like, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give us 4 stars. I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. It is Time Machine Tuesday. Got my man Howard Bryant on with us, and we are going to look back on what, quite honestly, and I don't even really feel bad about saying these terms, putting it in these terms, but was a really sad day for Black America. And it was when Christian Laettner, Coach K, Bobby Hurley, and them, Grant Hill, you are in the NIM part of it. You hadn't really, made your mark quite so much yet. They defeated UNLV in the national semifinal round of the NCAA tournament 35 years ago. It is, as crazy as it sounds, considering it was Duke, for those of you who can't imagine this, it is maybe the biggest basketball upset of my lifetime in the NCAA tournament. You could have like Villanova, Georgetown on this list, but this was a huge shock when it happened. It was a cultural touchstone moment when it happened, and I'm still not over it. But first, Howard, I feel like, we like to set the scene on these things to get people to understand a little bit about, for those who weren't there, some of the context of it. And I think this is truly fair to say that there were no two programs in college basketball less like one another in 1991 than Duke and UNLV, right? Like, they're both kind of relatively nouveau riche, because UNLV had a claim to be a legitimate power at that point, right? Like 1991 is their third Final Four, or maybe the fourth, but Tarkanian takes the job in the 70s, and UNLV is a team you got to think about all the time. At a school that literally just popped up out of nowhere in the desert, and they decided they wanted to have a basketball program to get attention to the school, and that worked. Then you had Duke, which had a strong program. They went to Final Fours in the 1970s, championship game in 1978, kind of fell off, but Mike Krzyzewski turned it into something different. In 1991, they, by then, have been to 5 Final Four. That's their 5th Final Four in the previous 6 years. UNLV, though, they had different boys than Duke has. Is that a fair way to put it?
That's a very fair way to put it. They were. It's fascinating when we think about what that time period was, because there were so many premises that no longer apply. And that's why this game was so important. This idea, even in 1991, 35 years ago, that there was something elevated about college basketball. There was something legitimate about college basketball. There was something aspirational about college basketball. It wasn't just a sport. It was still under that pipeline of the molding of young men, the pathway to something better, even if you weren't going to be a professional athlete, that there was some form of nobility to the sport. And of course, whenever you have that, now you start bringing up all the socioeconomic stuff. You start bringing in who gets to play. You start bringing in, the elite versus the street teams and all that. And UNLV really was, to me at least, that first team where you were like, are any of these guys eligible to be admitted into a university without basketball? Without basketball, this is a real touchstone moment. This is and especially against a team like Duke, where these guys are supposed to, they're the elite citizens in addition to being basketball players. They're the leaders. And this was the first. I mean, obviously, Georgetown was the first one. Georgetown was the first team of my lifetime. When you start thinking about when did you start watching college basketball, Georgetown was the first one where, like, that was Black America's team.
Yeah.
When it came to, okay, who's wearing the starter jackets? UNLV was second.
Yeah. And it's funny because John Thompson had a clear mission at Georgetown of, I'm going to get people into Georgetown that wouldn't get into Georgetown otherwise, right? And that's not to say that they can't perform at Georgetown, but he was, and I think the university, I've not read the particulars on this, but I think that they would admit this to a degree that I think that Temple would admit this, which was they let John Thompson and John Chaney do a little bit of their cultural outreach, right? Yeah. That was their give back, was this basketball team. And they created a brand that, as we've talked about many times, I grew up thinking that Georgetown was an HBCU.
So did I.
I don't know why I didn't think Temple was an HBCU because they had volleyball lines, but on the court. But with those coaches and those teams, I really thought that those were black schools. But there was a different.
Temple was way more black than Georgetown. When you walk on Temple's campus, there you saw black students as well. The thing about Georgetown was when you walked on Georgetown's campus, the only black people you saw was the basketball team.
Yeah, and that's wild because all I knew about Georgetown was the basketball team, right?
100%.
But their mission was a little different, right? Jerry Tarkanian at UNLV, I believe, is it fair to say that, I don't know, to call them the first renegade program is maybe going too far because there's always been programs that played a little loose with it. But it was a program in the image of Las Vegas in the sense that the story that goes basically that Tarkanian was the coach at Long Beach State. And that's where he realized that playing fair was for suckers.
Yeah, he was Calipari before Calipari.
Yeah, but he looked over at UCLA and could see how the sausage was being made over there.
Yep.
And he was like, brother, what are we talking about, right? So he takes this job at UNLV, and I contend just about every college basketball program is as discerning as it has to be to get the players that they want to have. You can look at the players that John Calipari had at Kentucky. They are not the same as the players that he was playing at Memphis, and not the same as the players that he was playing when he was at UMass, right? The top-notch programs, I'll use this phrasing, don't have to take nearly as many chances. Jerry Tarkanian, that was all the chances, baby. They were taking them all, and what I always thought interesting about him is he was also doing it within the idea and paradigm of I am using college sports to improve their lives, which I think is incontrovertibly true. Was what was was something that he did. These guys did wind up going to college and going to places they would not have gone to otherwise, if not for him. But nobody was running a Father Flanagan operation quite like Tark was.
And especially the hypocrisies of it. I think one of the things that I actually really did sort of appreciate about Tark was when you're at Long Beach State and you're watching UCLA operate, you're recognizing that UCLA is operating and still receiving dispensation for doing some of the same underhanded stuff that other folks are being castigated for. And so that recognition that playing by the rules is for suckers is absolutely accurate from the standpoint of who's making the rules. Because the leaders, the UCLAs and the Dukes and the North Carolinas and all of those, it's not as though they're doing it the right way. Right? Not always doing it the right way. When I look at Tark, I see Barry Switzer.
Mm-hmm.
I see the guy who's just street smart enough to know how the game works. He's no dummy. He recognizing it, and he's like, "Come and get me." And I think he's also, along with Switzer, one of those coaches, one of those renegade coaches, not where he was the first guy who was doing the stuff. He was the guy that the industry was like, we got to stop this guy. What he's doing is bad for everybody. So he becomes the flashpoint for something that has been going on for a very, very long time, but he's moving into legitimate spaces at the top of the game and making everybody else really, really nervous.
Yeah, and this is also before Las Vegas became seen as being a little bit more family friendly. And this was Las
still
Vegas.
Casino.
Yeah. Like the area around campus, the college town in this case is Las Vegas, right? Like if you've ever landed in Vegas and you take your cab from to the Strip, you see UNLV right there. Like that's the scene that's around there. Right. That is New Haven. That is Cambridge.
Where are we going after class?
Right. What are we doing on your recruiting visit? Right.
That's right.
It is Las Vegas. So all of that is surrounding that. And then you have Duke, which was the Boston Celtics, the Utah Jazz, and the Phoenix Suns of college basketball all rolled into one. Right. The first superstar of the K era is Johnny Dawkins. That's how you wind up with these confused African Americans who are Duke fans. Right. A lot of them got on board with him. Right.
I was one of them. Dawkins Amaker.
Yeah, man. They was with that. Like that was the thing. But then as it went, it just got to be tough because it wasn't so much they had all them white dudes, is that the announcers were very obviously cheering for them. Like you could not ignore that fact. But they got to the championship game in 1986, where I think they went into the tournament, the number team in the country. They lost to Louisville, which was quietly a black people team that we don't talk about on the list of black people teams, but they were
that Denny Crum thing.
Yeah, man, Denny Crum, baby, they had that, right? Duke is on this run going through all these Final Fours, and if you watch Game Theory with Bomani Jones, you'll see me talk about this. All the teams that black people love, Duke was they was legend killers. Like they ran through. They got Georgetown in '88. Louisville is the only one that really held down the fort for La Gente. You know what I mean? They got Arkansas out of there in 1990. Georgia Tech kind of fit the bill. You know what I'm saying? Like that was another program where it's like, engineers, you say? But Duke got them out. I mean, look, Duke was just beating black people. This was what it was. And the announcers were cheering them on, but they could never get over the top. They never could. And so they played this game in the championship in 1990. Well, actually, let me stop there, because I think there's another part of it too that is forgotten, is that North Carolina was also like in the green book for black people as programs. Dean Smith basically integrated the Atlantic Coast Conference unilaterally. Mm-hmm. And Duke was the antithesis of that also. Like they were on the wrong side of all of it.
That's what's really interesting too about when you think about it, if you're of a certain age, depending on your fandom. I was Georgetown. And then because when I was in high school, I was a guard. Of course, you saw Dawkins and Amaker. And I told Tommy Amaker this. I was like, that was my team. And then as you get older, now you start to see all the other elements. Like when you're in high school, it's just basketball. I didn't know anything about Duke. I didn't even know where Duke was. And then when you get into your 20s and stuff, you start learning about class. And now you're taking all those classes and you're like, oh, I was rooting maybe kind of for the wrong team. I'm learning all kinds of things, that these things run a little bit counter to my personal values. I didn't care. I didn't know the difference between a public and a private university. Like these things weren't, I was just a basketball fan. I watched Tommy Amaker threw an alley-oop to Johnny Dawkins, who was 6'2", over David Robinson in the tournament. I was like, I like that. I'll take that. And then now you start to get, by the time you get to 90, especially the 90 championship game, now you're looking at other things. Now you start looking at, it's almost like...
I want to say one thing right fast for the people who don't know. Howard Bryant, an alumnus of Temple University, and in the middle of this awakening, Duke beat Temple in the Elite Eight in 1988.
When we were finally the number one, and only time we were the number one team in the country, at the Meadowlands, trying to get Coach Chaney to his first ever Final Four. And Mark Macon shot 6 for 29. And still only lost that game by 7 points.
Yeah.
Lost 88-81, and Billy King shut down Macon, and let's not talk about this.
Okay. Just needed to give context. Just need to give some context.
But what I was saying was, by the time you get to 90, now all of a sudden you've got that Catholics versus convicts thing going on, where now everybody's talking about it's race, it's class, it's not just basketball anymore. And one of the interesting things about that time period too is you're talking about John Thompson, Georgetown, you're talking about Nolan Richardson, this is also, let us also not forget an extremely important figure during this time period, and that's Al Campanis. Yes. So 3 years earlier, you've got Al Campanis on Nightline talking about the 40th anniversary of Jackie Robinson, and that's where he famously says, that blacks aren't meant to be coaches and executives because they lack the necessities. So this is a really, really important time in discussing the competency of black coaches. The NFL, that year, 1990, that was the first year they had just hired. Art Shell. It's the first black coach in the NFL since 1922.
Wayne Fonts was right there. Wayne Fonts was right there. Wayne Fonts
Cape Verdean, but still.
Yeah. See, that's how they get you.
Just just providing a few things. But this is a time period. This is the precursor to the Oscars So White and the BLMs and all of the things that would come later. This was the first one where everyone's talking about how come we don't have any black coaches? And you've got John Thompson, who had finally won in 84. How come we don't, why don't we have these things? And this is also happening at the exact same time, too, of Prop 48 and Prop 42. So one of the fascinating things about this time period is, especially when we're talking about it in 2026, is education was actually an issue back then. You're actually really having a conversation about we are still here to educate. It's not just basketball. It's not just the money. It's not all of those things. It's happening, all of these things. It's a sort of a perfect storm. You've got Prop 48, which came in with the NCAA regulations that you had to have a 2.0 and a 700 SAT, which John Thompson and Nolan Richardson and those guys and Cheney were going off on because they thought it was anti-black. Then you had they doubled down. That was 86. Then they doubled down in 1989 with Prop 42, which was to say you can't even have a scholarship. You're not even eligible for a scholarship if you don't have these numbers, which, of course, Cheney and Richardson and Thompson, especially Thompson, went wild on as well. It's like, okay, so you want the talent, but you're also trying to you're also trying to get rid of certain people you don't want them to play. And so all of these things are happening at the same time. And here comes Southern Ivy League Duke beginning to make its ascendancy into the top of the game. A lot of different social factors taking place, and we're not even talking about the basketball yet.
Yeah, like it's in. People have to understand at that time. This is the 80s are when the blackening of college basketball really happens. Like I was joking on Monday, talking about how I saw Nebraska had 5 white dudes on the floor in that game, and I'd never seen that in a real game before. That was
BYU.
Yeah, like I saw BYU with 5 black dudes on the floor.
They didn't have 5 black dudes on the court in the 5 decades previous.
Yes, like it's wild times, right? But the idea that obviously there have been a lot of great black college basketball players. Number one pick always was ... But there were different programs had different racial profiles, and just about every team had some white dudes on it, right?
That's
like this,
right.
like
even Georgetown at the end of the bench.
Yeah. But just about everybody had some white dudes in the rotation. And also, I always used to say, as the years went on, the true strength of your college basketball program, you were as good as the white dudes that you could attract. Like if you could still get super cold white dudes, that's when you had a problem. I'm not just talking about, the dude that can stand over there in the corner. You're going to get you some white dudes. Man, Jerry Tarkanian had no time for that. He was not even wasting his time thinking he was going to get them white dudes to go over there. Like Larry Johnson and Christian Laettner are not of the same place, right?
No.
Bobby Hurley's a bit more of a working class guy. But that was the other thing about Duke with the program, though, is that they had a bunch of dudes that looked like they would go to Duke.
Yes, they did.
Like that was what the game was they had. And so 1990, they were
the Dodgers.
Yeah.
They were the Dodgers of the 70s, that we don't just play the game, we play the game the right way. We're the clean cut. There was an optics thing going on about how they were presenting.
Yeah, and they're very self-aware about it, because when it changed at the end of the first decade of the 21st century, it's because they were conscious that it didn't play anymore. Like,
that's right.
They knew they had a thing that was working for them, and so they played against UNLV in 1990. And look, that 1990 UNLV team was very good and thought of. They had already beat America's sweetheart Loyola Marymount by 30 points in the Elite Eight. Somebody had to do it. You know what I mean? It was if you weren't there, it was a very sad thing. But they went ahead and they decided to do that. But they actually were losing at the half to Georgia Tech in that game in the semifinal in 1990 with Kenny Anderson and Dennis Scott and Brian Oliver. They came back and win that. They play in Duke, and it was a close game in the first half in 1990. And then I think it was after the first TV timeout, it was over. It was an ass whooping that was indelible in your mind, because it always felt like if the game mattered, Duke was going to win, right? No matter what, the refs was going to cheat or something like that. Dude, Duke could have had 7 players on the floor, man. They wasn't going to
beat. And they still would have got beat by 30. That game was seminal to me for a couple of reasons. The first was the final score. One, if you're a college basketball fan of the 80s, and even today still, you top 100 points in 40 minutes, you're doing something.
Yeah, keep in mind it was a 45-second shot clock in that time.
And also the other thing to remember, and that's what I mean about, it's like some of this stuff is so foundational and we don't think about it anymore because it's all over, is that was also, there were 2 things taking place during that time period too. One, you were I think the shot clock was only 5 years old.
Yeah.
because I still remember that 39-36 Georgetown SMU game where you just held the ball. If you had a 5-point lead with 10 minutes left, you just held the ball for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then they start bringing in, I think the Big East had a 30-second shot clock, and the National was 45 seconds. And so all the different conferences had different shot clocks. The other thing to remember is that was, I think, the second year or the third year, if 87 might have been the first year, of the 19-9 3-point line. 19-9 for 3 points. And so the whole thing, everything is happening during that time period where it really is a very underrated transitional period in the sport.
Yeah, everything is changing. And these dudes were just beating them down the floor, right?
Yeah. And I was going to say, Bo, I don't mean to interrupt. There's one last, I forgot a piece I was going to say too. And the reason why that game was so wild to me, it wasn't just the final score. It was also the fact that this was one of those mandate games. It was like, oh, this is what the future is going to look like, because Duke got rolled. Yes. They got rolled in so many ways where you looked at that and you go, these guys are playing a different style of basketball. It wasn't like NBA basketball, but what it was it was close enough and athletic enough, and it did something that should have happened 6 years earlier, 7 years earlier, but it didn't, because Phi Slamma Jamma lost. There was this idea that you could still be athletic in college basketball. You could still, you could try that Tarkanian stuff, but when the real teams came and played the real fundamental basketball, and when they really did all the textbook stuff, your athleticism was going to lose. Not that night. Yeah,
well, a key is Jerry Tarkanian was a much better basketball coach than Guy V. Lewis was.
That's
Hard
right.
Stop, right? Like that's the part that it comes down to. That Tark was interesting because he had a signature style of play that was based on clear strategy, like the amoeba defense.
Yeah.
It was a thing, right? I don't know if he was the greatest offensive tactician necessarily, but it was a defense begets offense sort of situation. Like
that's when they play defense.
Right. Like that was a coach that was there. Because look, that UNLV team, what it didn't have was a lot of size, right? Like its best player was 6'5" Larry Johnson at power forward. And there is no way that we could possibly explain to you what a monster. And like it wasn't Charles Barkley, right? There's only one of those. Yeah. But it felt similar. Like it was a suddenness to the way that he played at that height, an explosion at what he was able to do. Ooh, boy.
And also had Stacey Augmon, who was one of those precursors to positionless basketball. He's actually, in a lot of ways, he was your second point guard on that team at 6'7", with all the long arms and the defense and the whole thing. He's in that Pippen mode, right? You can just, once again, you can start seeing the game change.
Right. Point guard is Greg Anthony. I mean, he's a 10-year NBA vet, right? Anderson Hunt at 2 guard, which doesn't mean anything now, but at the time sure seemed like a big deal. Like he wasn't
a very good player.
He was the most outstanding player in the 1990 tournament because he was one of the first of those guys right there on that wing in that 19-9, like hitting those shots. And look, Duke, the 1990 team was young when you look back on it. It's a freshman Bobby Hurley.
Youngest team.
Sophomore Christian Laettner.
It's the youngest team in the Final Four.
Yeah, it's like senior Ala Abdel Nabi, like the guys that are Danny Ferry had left off the team before, like the guys that are leaving are not that important. It's the foundation of obviously what becomes a back-to-back championship team. But they were not ready for that game. And
Grant Hill was a freshman.
Yeah, no, Grant Hill, 90. Grant Hill isn't even there.
Oh, 90. I'm sorry, I'm thinking 91.
Yeah.
90. Yes, he's not even 90, there.
Yeah, 90, he's not even there. But this led to something that you talked about in our phone conversations about this, which was the question was coming up about Duke. Like, okay, yeah, you've made 4 Final Fours in 5 years, but you're going to win or what? Like now they were getting squeezed for the fact that forget about how incredible it was that they could win that many games at all. The squeeze had begun. Keeping in mind that while they're making those Final Fours, Carolina's made none. Carolina hasn't been to a Final Four at this point since 1982. And Duke is now 4 out of 5 years.
That's right. And also, by the time you get after that game, when we talk the 91 game, we're going to talk about the vaunted Duke team that is inevitable now, that we all hate now, that always finds a way to win now. They had lost 4 out of 5 to the eventual national champion.
Yeah.
Right. So it was sort of like, okay, when are y'all going to do it? When are you going to win? And it's wild to think about Mike Krzyzewski as the guy under pressure to produce. Are you, to ask the question of Mike Krzyzewski, are you actually a winner? And I think about this when you go back to those time periods, because it was such a different period that in today's game, his job would be in jeopardy.
He's not wrong.
You lose 4 times to the eventual champion, people would look at you like you're the problem.
Yeah. And look, coming up next, we're going to get to that game in 1991. And, well, yeah, we'll get there coming up next. It's time to slide your glass slippers over your lucky socks and hope for a fairy tale ending. It starts when you put in $10 on FanDuel Predicts, and we match it with a $10 bonus. Buckle up for the buzzer beaters that break brackets, shots that silence arenas, and runs that rewrite history. Take a position on the spread, total points, or the winning team. Follow the action in real time. March matchups are on FanDuel Predicts.
Offered by FanDuel Prediction Market, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant. 18 plus, 1 per user. Minimum $10 deposit required. Trading derivatives involves significant risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Manage your activity with our consumer protection tools.
Did you know Fast Growing Trees is America's largest and most trusted online nursery with thousands of trees and plants and over 2 million happy customers? They have all the plants your yard or home needs, including fruit trees, privacy trees, flowering trees, shrubs, and houseplants, all grown with care and guaranteed to arrive healthy. It's like your local nursery, but anywhere you live, with more plants than you'll find anywhere else. Whatever you're looking for, Fast Growing Trees helps you find options that actually work for your climate, space, and lifestyle. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to get your dream yard. Just click, order, grow, and get healthy, thriving plants delivered to your door. Their Alive and Thrive guarantee promises that your plants arrive happy and healthy. No green thumb required, just quality plants you can count on. Plus, get ongoing support from trained plant experts who can help you plan your landscape, choose the right plants, and learn how to care for them every step of the way. I recently ordered some plants from Fast Growing Trees and cannot wait to add them to my own plant collection. Right now, they have great deals on spring planting essentials and up to half off on selected plants. And listeners to our show get 20% off their first purchase when using the code Bomani at checkout. That's an additional 20% off better plants and better growing at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code Bomani at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code Bomani. Now's the perfect time to plant. Let's grow together. Use Bomani to save today. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. All right, we are back with Howard Bryant. So the thing about that 1991 UNLV team, rock stars. Everybody came back. Like they win a national championship. Larry Johnson, back. Stacey Augmon, back. Anderson Hunt, back. Greg Anthony, back. And they were playing in a backwater conference, the Big West, right? The Big West was not really a thing.
But they weren't in the Big West back then. They were in the PCAA, I think.
No, they were in the Big West.
Was it Big West 91?
Yeah, okay. They were in the Big West.
My apologies.
But they still set up a good non-conference schedule. Like they have the game at Barnhill Arena, number 1 versus 2. Number 2, UNLV against Arkansas, where Todd Day and Larry Johnson get into a fight there because Arkansas had been to the Final Four that year before. That was an up and down game, boy. Yep. Like that was one of those, it was like 100-something to 90-something type of games. 40 minutes of hell, so they run in the press. They are similar personalities, similar archetypes. Because Nolan Richardson was like, who's in Memphis? Come on down, or come on over here, and let's go. Like I remember that game being such a big deal. That to me is like maybe at that point the blackest college basketball game that there had ever been.
Yeah, that and once again, the underrated piece of those teams. And this is where I sort of separate Georgetown, because Georgetown was a defensive team that had very questionable offense. I mean, until they got Iverson, Georgetown was never a Thompson team that was offense first.
No.
But with Nolan's teams and with Tark's teams, you got all that defensive intensity, but they could put the ball in the basket too.
Yes. And they had guys like Lee Mayberry was a first round pick. Todd Day was a first round pick. Like that was a game. UNLV won that, but UNLV ran through their schedule. They were they were the national champions from day one, it felt. Like wire to wire. We knew which way this was going to go. There weren't even really a lot of close games along the way. Like when they had won the championship in 90, they lost games in conference, right?
Yeah.
Like those kinds of things could happen. That did not happen in this. Meanwhile, Duke is playing in, 1990s ACC basketball is some like, these are the glory days type of situation there. There's a lot of guys in that conference. You got Kenny Anderson coming back for his sophomore year. North Carolina with what turned out to be its first team to go to the Final Four in 9 years. NC State, I think you got Rodney Monroe and Chris Corchiani were there. Like there were it was the gold standard conference of college basketball at this point.
100%. And I think that was the other piece of it. When you think about, or at least when I was thinking about Vegas, was the way that you follow up a championship. They're undefeated. Like they were on the verge of making you rethink everything you thought you knew about college basketball. They were crushing everybody. And they were crushing everybody. And by the way, underneath all of that was Tark is dirty.
Yes.
And so you've got there's an Oakland Raiders bad boy thing going on here where it's like, oh, we're going to have to contend with these guys at the top of the game. In a lot of ways, Fab Fiving before the Fab Five, right?
Yes. The Fab Five will tell you that.
Mm-hmm. And they were blackening the game up, and the coaches were exploiting that because the biggest thing that we didn't talk about, that was the most important thing in 1991 when you're Duke walking out of there, after they got beat 103-73 in a championship game, was we're afraid of them. They're too fast. They're too black. They're too athletic. They're too everything. They're doing too many things that escape the rules of college basketball. Because let's also not forget, back then, it's a lot different today, but back then, one of the other things about college basketball was the officiating was also teaching. Back then, when you watch the college basketball game, my goodness, they called every damn infraction, right? I believe a travel back then was 1.5 steps in college, where it's 2 steps in the pros, and today it doesn't really matter. And so they were really, really structuring the game in a very traditional way. And Vegas blew everybody's doors off. And so the thing that if you're Duke going into that tournament in 91, and I'm one of the forwards on that team, Brian Davis, had said it too, that we have to prove that we're not afraid of them. And it's a certain type of fear. There's the type of fear when you just know the other team's better than you. And then there's the type of fear where you are racially and emotionally intimidated by them. They were playing a black game. And Krzyzewski and those guys knew that we're emotionally afraid of this. And that's a different type of fear.
And somewhat, I don't even think ironic's the right word, but I think you'll understand what I mean. The brand of what they were doing was pushing back against this. Like this was a stand.
That's
in
right.
a lot of ways.
You know what this was, Bo? This was in a lot of ways, whether people want to admit it or not, this was one of those unfortunately yet necessary racial referendums in sports about who gets to play and who doesn't play and who dominates and who teaches and who doesn't, who's legit and who's not. This is 1977 NBA Finals. This is the do it the right way Trailblazers against the freewheeling 76ers.
Yeah. And then you get to this Final Four, which even in real time was a legendary Final Four of sorts. Yeah. In the end, it turns out it's 4 Hall of Fame coaches. But it was Carolina's return to the Final Four. It was Roy Williams at Kansas' first Final Four. So you had on one side of the bracket, you had Carolina and Kansas, this weird incestuous pair of college basketball programs that sends people back and forth all through their history.
Each other. That's right.
It's a lot. Dean Smith is a guy from Kansas. Roy Williams is the guy that coached Kansas from North Carolina. Larry Brown, a North Carolina guy who coached at Kansas.
Wins
they play in the 1957, the Will Chamberlain game. Like they overlap a lot. Anyway, but the big thing is Roy Williams, Dean Smith is basically his dad.
That's right.
Right. And he's coaching in that game. And then on the other side, you have this rematch of UNLV and Duke, and the media sold this one a lot harder because they had a lot more time to prepare for it.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of happened haphazardly in 1990 because there was no guarantee you were going to get that game. You had a week going in where it was absolutely black hat, white hat game going into that.
And Vegas is, by the way, and Vegas is also going after UCLA's records. They're undefeated.
Yes.
And there hasn't been an undefeated team since Bobby Knight in 76.
Right.
And so there's a lot on the line for UNLV.
Yeah, and they felt just in total in that game, it did not feel going into it like Duke had a chance just because they had been outclassed so thoroughly. But they did, I mentioned this, him in the NIM part of this, but they did add Grant Hill. And that was important, particularly in a game where what we learned as the game went on that was important for UNLV was what they didn't have was depth.
Yeah.
And Greg Anthony in foul trouble was a big deal.
And fouled out.
Yep.
With 5 minutes to go. They were leading when he fouled out of that game. Going into that game, there were a couple of things, too, at work that were really important. And that intimidation factor. And I went and rewatched the game on YouTube just to make sure my memories were accurate. And one of the things, two things really jumped out at me. The first thing was just the journalism. Watching the game, in 1991, James Brown was a sideline reporter for CBS. Billy Packer and Jim Nantz were on the call. It wasn't dominated. The conversations and the discussion around the game was still dominated by professional reporters and not ex-players. So there's a lot of it has a different feel to it. The other thing that hit me about that too, in watching these teams go at each other, was that the amount of time that they emphasized on intimidation. There's a code word in there. There's a lot of code in there that you're talking about making sure that McCaffrey and Laettner and Hurley aren't intimidated by Augman and Johnson and George Ackles.
That was a Billy Packer special, that game.
Exactly right. That was right in his wheelhouse. And it really does sort of underscore that they're fighting for the soul at a sport right then and there. And what I thought was fascinating about watching that game was the number of, and Leslie Visser was another sideline reporter on that. What I found fascinating about that was the number of times that they had quoted Krzyzewski in the timeouts, talking about how, because Duke hung in there, it was a 2-point game. The largest lead in the game was 2 or 3 points, 4 points, here and there, 5 points. It was not, nobody went on a big run in that game, especially in the first half. And Krzyzewski is imploring his team. It's like Rocky IV. He's just a man, right? It's like, in other words, you don't have to be afraid of these black dudes. They're just people. And we're going to beat them. And we're beating them. And so you could tell that a lot of Krzyzewski's coaching was to demystify this idea of black athletic invincibility. And
look, man, the thing about Krzyzewski is he sees himself as a tough guy.
Mm-hmm.
He is a Bob Knight disciple. He went
Army guy.
Yeah, so he went to West Point. He grew up Polish kid on the south side of Chicago. The idea of being pushed around by anybody is antithetical to his very being and very existence. And what wound up happening with that UNLV team, it steeled those dudes. And so Christian Laettner, who's now a junior, by the end becomes as unflappable as a college basketball player had ever been. But you are absolutely right. The idea was, you can't be scared of those black dudes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, but we I ain't gonna lie, man.
But we kind of are. We are afraid of them.
Yeah.
And Larry Johnson has gold teeth.
That's what I was about to say. You see that gold tooth? like it's right there. Like, you telling me I don't really understand what you even talking about right now, man. Mm-hmm. Like, what you think?
That's right. And underneath all of that is this idea that these guys aren't really college students. They're not students. Yeah. They're not. They're not. This is not a molders of men game. That these guys, dare you say the word thug, right? This is where it's all happening. And let's also not forget, underneath all of that, the NCAA is looking very deeply into Jerry Tarkanian every chance it gets.
Yes, at every turn. It is a legal battle that went on for a very long time. We have landmark legal decisions that that come out of this. But in the end, you watched this game more recently than I did. What Duke just kind of won, right? Because I mean,
the fix.
Yeah, we can bring this up now.
Yes.
It was so implausible to us that Duke could win that game that we widely believed that there was a wide belief that the game was fixed.
Widely believed that the game was fixed.
Now, keeping in mind, there were also like pictures of UNLV players in a hot tub with a man who was referred to as
the fixer.
The fixer. So I don't want to pretend as though like there's no reason that it might have come up in conversation.
Is that Moses Scurry in the hot tub with the fixer?
I think yes, Moses Scurry, and I can't remember who the other dude was.
Yeah, and also and also there were those plays that kind of got circled. Did Larry Johnson hesitate on a shot that he could have made? All of it, and so the reason why I went and watched this game wasn't just to make sure that my recollections were accurate. It was also to go look at those plays again. I was like, let me go see if I'm going to do a little 8-man out and start circling plays. And you know what I discovered about that game? Duke won the game.
Really?
That what I saw in that, I saw there's one clear comp to me in that game. And maybe two if I can think about another one, but there's one that really, really, really jumps out at me. That's the 2007 Super Bowl all over again. That is Giants. Oh. That is Giants Patriots, where everything is on the line, and you could tell that UNLV is like, what do you mean we're losing? I mean, like the game's tied, like the game's they hadn't trailed in the second half, but twice all season. One was to Georgia Tech, and the other one was, I think, Ball State, maybe, or something like that. They really hadn't been. They killed everybody so badly. And it reminded me of what John McEnroe used to tell me about pressure when he said, I never forgot this. It's really, really great. Pressure is the possibility you could lose. And now you start watching that game. It's a 2-point game at the half. And all of a sudden, these guys didn't buck. They're still here. And then on top of that, Greg Anthony gets into foul trouble. They're up 3, and it looks like they're starting to pull away. About 5 minutes left. Here they come, right? 6 minutes left. Greg Anthony goes in for a layup that would have given them a 5-point lead. They call a charge, which wouldn't be called a charge today. And the whole game changes. And suddenly it's not the game that you thought it was. And now Anderson Hunt has to play point guard, and all of the stuff is, and you can tell by looking at them when they're passing the ball around, they don't know what to do because they just got hit. And you could tell that it was like, holy shit, this whole thing's falling apart. We might not win. And that, to me, when you watch that game, is the real, like, we're supposed, they never went on the 10-0 run. They never went on the 18-0. They never got going. That they played a game in the mud and never got out of the mud and didn't quite know how to close.
And I think there's something I think interesting to me about that game for UNLV that I view very similarly to the January 1987 Fiesta Bowl with Penn State and Miami, which is, and people say they don't do this on purpose, and it's true, but I think it's one of those moments where you remember, oh yeah, these guys are 20 and 21 years old.
That's right.
Right? Like the most humanizing element of college sports are those moments where you realize, oh, that's right.
They're just kids.
They're just kids. And that is like seeing Michael Irvin and Alonzo Highsmith and Melvin Bratton and all those guys bawling on the sidelines after they'd been truly obnoxious for all this time when they were on top. And then it gets to the end and it's like, oh yeah, that's right. That's where they are. That's where they are in this. And with UNLV trying to get a shot off on that last possession, they choked.
Didn't even have a play.
Yeah.
Didn't know where to go. Anderson Hunt went for the win. And Larry Johnson, that shot that he supposedly held up, so to set up, they've got the lead, and Duke comes back and ties it. And Laettner hits 2 free throws to give him the 2-point lead with 12.7 seconds left. 12.7 seconds left is a lifetime in basketball. Right? And back then, NBA rules are not the same as college rules back then. Back then, you couldn't take the ball out at half court. So you had to take the ball from your own basket. But still, 12.7 seconds is plenty of time to get what you want. And by the time UNLV got the ball over half court, they were like, oh shit, we're going to lose. Larry Johnson's got a kind of set up three, but it's not a wide open. The way people talked about that, it was like he had pulled a Ben Simmons or something. Like he had a 10-footer and decided not to shoot and kicked it out.
Yeah, because by the way, people were using this as fixed evidence.
Exactly. This was the shot that Larry Johnson, it was a 3-point from the elbow. It's like a 22-foot shot, maybe a little inside, but it was a 3-point shot. He didn't take it. He had a guy rushing out at him. I was like, that's the fix. It was so different from what I remembered the conversation to be. And then they kick it back out, and Anderson Hunt takes a desperation three with two guys on him, and it's a brick, and they lose the game. But to me, there were two things that really jumped out watching that game. The first was that Duke didn't fold. It's like the bully took a swing and they didn't go anywhere. They're like, okay, we're here to play. They were here to play. That's the first thing. The second thing was how different the game of basketball is played. You go back and hop on YouTube and watch that game. That shit is packed in the paint. I mean, it is Detroit Pistons packed in the paint. Like everybody is on top of each other. And today the game is so spaced, and there's movement and there's flow, and guys, there's open shots. There were no open shots in that game, in the second half of that game. It was straight up hardcore basketball, old school basketball, where you're like on each other defensively. And, and by that point, the biggest piece of it was that your best player, national, player of the year material, Larry Johnson, they didn't give him the ball in the second half. He had a little tiny run with about 7 minutes left, but for the most part, neither he nor Stacey Augmon did anything in the second half. So, and at the same time, Christian Laettner had 20 in the first. Like those guys, it was a battle. It was a really, really great game. And then of course the last thing about it was your point guard fouls out and you didn't really know what to do.
Yeah, he's the only guy that can run the offense.
That's right.
Like that was the thing, is that once he went down, that's when it fell apart. Now, he doesn't foul out, they win that game. Yeah. Here's the fun part on this. This game led to the building. Honestly, I don't think there's been anything like it since then, which is the building of the legend of Christian Laettner.
This is where it starts.
This is where it starts. Like, this is the big win. I mean, he went to 4 Final Fours, won 2 national championships. And what this was, and there are a couple that had guided from him along the way, I suppose. But the big thing is, this is the beginning of Christian. Like, you fully understand it. Christian Laettner gave it to every one of the top players of his era.
Yeah.
In some cases, multiple times.
It's also
Shaq got it multiple times from him, home and on the road. Fab Five got it home, road, and neutral site.
Mm-hmm.
He gave it to everybody.
Yeah. One thing about that game, though, that I do want to go back to that, but one thing about this game, too, that I thought was interesting was my recollection was also that it was Bobby Hurley giving him the business, too. And it wasn't.
Oh.
It wasn't. Anderson Hunt and Greg Anthony ate his lunch. That was a guard run offense. And Anderson Hunt and Greg Anthony, they killed Bobby Hurley. They killed him. They hunted Bobby Hurley. They were looking for where he was, and he couldn't hang with them. But Laettner could in the front court.
Yeah.
And that was the difference. And that was also, when you think about it, this is really, and you can go back when you think about, like, when we were talking about some of the social, racial stuff of it too, like, where was the creation of white Duke? It's Laettner.
Yeah.
Because
with a dash of Ferry.
And Ferry, but the 86 team had Mark Allery and Jay Billis and those guys, but it had Dawkins and Amaker. Right. And also because they didn't win, okay, they got Ferry, but they didn't win.
Yeah.
And nobody would have said, oh, you put Danny Ferry up against Shaq. I mean, it wasn't the same. Laettner, because of who he was given the business to,
yes,
emboldens the whole thing in a way that has always driven me crazy in terms of our discussion. It's like, okay, white great player suddenly comes with implications, right? It's not just that he's a great player and he did his thing. It's like, he's the standard now.
Yeah, and it required them to do some obviously hypocritical things because Laettner was such a jerk.
That's right.
Right? Like that was the part of it. It was like, I mean, he stepped on somebody in the
Chest.
Elite Eight round, and they
It's
did
a
not throw
UConn
him out
game.
of the game,
Mhm.
which allowed him to continue having what one might argue was the greatest game anybody's ever played in the history of college basketball.
And there was a moment in that game too where Grant Hill pops Greg Anthony in the face with his shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
which was once again, like, I don't want to overstate this, was once again, Duke had to prove they weren't punks,
Yeah.
right? And Billy Packer in that game goes, he needs to get thrown out of the game for that. And I'm thinking, imagine Grant Hill getting thrown out in the first half of that semifinal. And so, and then they went back and said, oh, no, I really don't think so. That on second thought, he hit him with the shoulder, not the forearm. But it was still very much a you can't intimidate us moment.
Yeah.
And then
if they needed to prove to anybody they weren't soft, they needed to prove it to that man over there screaming at them in that suit.
That's right.
Like unless y'all want to walk home.
That's right. And then a couple plays later, Larry Johnson walks by Grant Hill and gives him a shoulder to the face. I'm like, oh, they balling right now. This is a territorial game, right? Yeah. This is a territorial game, and I loved it because I was like, oh, these are all things like when I watched that game, I was 22 years old. So now you look at it with different eyes and you go, oh man, there was a lot at stake here. These guys were trying. It was an alpha game. Yeah. It was an alpha game, and for Krzyzewski as well to prove once again, like I said, because you got to remember him. He's probably at the sidelines also thinking at some point, when am I going to get one of these? And is Tarkanian going to roll me again 2 years in a row?
Right. I mean, this is a milestone moment in the history of college basketball.
100%.
Like this whole thing. And like I said, Laettner did not beat the Fab Five in those three locations. He simply beat them on the road and on the neutral site. The next year, Fab Five came to Cameron. After Laettner graduated and then won there. Jalen Rose said Krzyzewski beat him 4 times in that whole career. They gave it to Temple. They gave it to Arkansas. They gave it to Georgetown. Anybody that had a whiff of it, they was like, hey, we got something for all of y'all. Like this was, you're right. I think your point is a great one, that this is really kind of the building of the idea of Duke being white. And then it kind of got reinforced in the aughts because that 99 Duke team, which I contend is the best team Krzyzewski ever had. And I don't know if any white dudes got any minutes on that one. That's Elton Brand, Corey Maggette, William Avery, Trajan Langdon. Woo! Because that was when they was coming off after his back hit messed up. And when Duke needs to recover,
they can recover.
Yeah, they don't really get so caught up.
Yeah,
you know where they care about otherwise.
You know where they're looking for players.
Yeah. But like we ain't got time to play with y'all no more. Mm-hmm. Come on, you with the shady AAU coach. Yeah, come on down, partner.
Duke as villain starts here.
Yes,
you know, and Duke, and also Duke as hero starts here.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what, because they been villains in our house. My daddy was ahead of the game. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it took some other people a little long time to get wise. We was on it. We saw it.
We saw it. Yeah, I mean, I love that because like I said, I remember it's easy to like a team, and it's easy to take a team in whatever direction you want to take them when they don't win.
Yeah.
And then once they win, now you start looking at all of it differently. You know, it was kind of cute when Tom Brady won as underdogs and they beat the Rams and and then it wasn't cute in 5 years later. It doesn't get, because now the lens changes. And I think that what is fascinating about that game is that you can do this. You can circle seminal games and moments that sort of shift the balance and shift where things are going. And I think, like I said, in rewatching that game, the illusion or just the idea of education is on top of this too, because let's not forget, nobody would question Duke as an academic institution. People question UNLV because it didn't even exist in 1975, right? So it's like, this ain't even a real school.
Right.
So all of those different things, when you take all of those elements and you put them on the basketball court at an extremely high level with extremely high stakes, you got something remarkable, and that was a remarkable game.
That is Howard Bryant. Check out Kings and Pawns. I still got my copy right here for you guys to see here. It is an excellent book that I still highly recommend you go check out. Kings and Pawns on Jackie Robinson and Paul Robeson. Give this a look. My brother, I appreciate you.
Oh, my pleasure. This was fun. Like I said, I've just forgotten all about all of that. And I think it is like, I remember like I had a girlfriend who used to just laugh at me, like, because I used to watch, ESPN Classic and stuff. Like, did the score change? No. When was the game? 30 years ago. Why are you watching it? But it was fascinating watching this basketball, because it's not the same basketball that we see today.
Nah, man. It's a different game, brother. I appreciate you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on The Right Time. We do this 4 days a week. Ryan Brumley handles everything behind the scenes. Thank you, sir. Hit the voicemail line, 323-596-7767. Remember, follow The Right Time. Subscribe, like, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give us 4 stars. I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. And we'll talk to you guys in a couple of days. Take it easy.